sense, your performance, all these elements are in this really fantastic space, all wrapped together. As we get into the Renaissance, we start thinking, how does this happen? How does the mind work? How does the brain work? How do we actually see things? Why are things viewable in some ways? And, oh, what's a lens, by the way? And what's lens doing to light? And what is this doing in the rest of the world? These are virtual reality viewers from the 18th century in Japan, for example. Portable viewers that allow you to take images with you wherever you go. Projection appears at this point in the late 1600s, early 1700s. Projection precedes photography in the history of the world by 200 years. We could project images before we could make them photographically. That's an important idea because previsioning the future is very important in all this. Peep shows. The peep show is a box. Think of it as a virtual reality viewer of different scales. You could have multiple people using the viewer. The content was often, as it is today, salacious to get people interested in this. You had portable versions. You had versions which were used for entertainment. This is a multi-person virtual reality viewing system. Each viewport is a different city around the world. You paid your entry fee and you could hop from chair to chair, city to city. This is Berlin in the 1880s. Projection continues to evolve into performance, into theater. We're very interested in the concept of how we see now for the first time using various devices coming in the later part of the 19th century. This is a group of women having tea in the 1880s, and notice the woman in the yellow dress on the right is using a virtual reality viewer. These viewers are very common at this point, and they're quite elegant. They're made of mahogany and brass and glass. They still work today, 150 years later. I guarantee you your Oculus Rift will not work 150 years from now in the future. Photography comes along. Photography was never meant to be black and white. Photography was also meant to represent the real world. It was supposed to be in color. It was supposed to be in 3 dimension. So you make the first picture, it's black and white. That's cool, but it needs color. Let's add some color to it. That's better, but it's only 2D. We need it 3D. Let's split them and make 2 of these. Now we've got 3D in color. Now it's starting to look like the real world. So you combine this with these viewing devices, and you have a plethora of ways to see in your own home. Now, at this same time, we're beginning to create things like television, 19th century television. What you get in the previsioning and technology is it often precedes by more than 100 years the actual thing. So for 100 years, people were talking about, writing about, and creating memes about television before there ever was a television. They completely understood the concept. They were just waiting for when is it going to happen. This is the difficult thing in the future telling and prognostication. It's not what's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. So we get a lot of efforts. Here we got people that are doing projected image live on the phone to somebody in China. He's doing business live. It's a business Skype call. Here we have a very interesting thing. You would think today the notion of 2 people sitting next to each other and texting each other is a kind of modern meme, right? No, no. This is the development of the system for when we first had transatlantic cables. It was to send signals across that allowed you to know what was happening in the stock market. So here they've got stock tickers, and this couple is texting each other. This is in the late 1870s. So none of this is new. Here's Edison's widescreen, projected, real-time. He's on the phone with the person who just stepped off the tennis court to take the call in real time. This is in the 1870s, 1880s. All this was previsioned. We could see it coming. I love the Skype system in the middle here. These are things that were being worked out. This is when you say we're in the early days of VR and AR. We're in the previsioning period. We're not actually in the period yet. We're still figuring out how all this stuff is going to work. The first panorama. Panorama photography is crucial to all this. Wrap around. We want to immerse ourselves. The cyclorama, the panorama, is a physical entity that you would go into. You would look at these great surround 360 images. They were 3-dimensional in lots of ways. Here you can see at the bottom you had real figures, real people, and real objects that have been blended into the painting. So you cannot tell where the reality ends and begins into the unreality. These were very popular all over the world. We have one right here in Boston. It's called the Cyclorama down on Tremont Street. It's still there today. It was very popular in its day. Photography brings us more into the panorama stage. We get it through all the different media of photography, and then it begins to get a business model attached to it. This is one of the great business models of the late 19th century. You could shoot one picture and sell everybody in the picture a copy, right? This was great in the photography business, right? And even better, you could get in trains and boats, and the more you could get in, the better. But the idea was to wrap this around you. And in about the 1920s, we start getting the first immersive films. Abel Gance, 1927, a 3-screen, hand-colored history of Napoleon. This was actually recreated at the Wang Theater in the 1880s here in Boston, the 1980s here in Boston. Live symphony orchestra, hand-colored film projected. You were looking into the past in the 1920s, but you're really looking at the future of cinema. Science fiction begins to kick in. Here are these two people in virtual reality headsets. They've got a screen on the outside so you can actually see what they're seeing, and they have the discussion here. And through the 50s, we're starting to get this notion again of pre-visioning a slightly distant future as we go forward. This is probably my first virtual reality headset on the right, bought out of a comic book for 99 cents in the 1950s. This is the first novel about virtual reality. It was written in 1935 by Stanley Weinbaum. Two professors who invented VR glasses. On the right, you see the movie that they're looking at and the scene on the left. The full-length novel completely lays out the entire spectrum of how virtual reality will unfold in the future. Hasn't happened yet, remember. This is pre-visioning. The Second World War, as all wars, kicked technology up by several notches. One of the big things here, goggles become about the future. If you were a famous aviator between the wars and you wanted sponsorship, you didn't go to a shoe company, you went to a goggles company. Every single adventurer flyer in the world was sponsored by one of the major goggle companies, including Hillary climbing Everest over on the right. The Russians. There's a whole discussion about the Russians. They have a different agenda for how all this works. Some of it crazy, some of it pretty cool. After the war, 3D reappears in theaters. We start to see all these same things. Vibrating chairs, smells, 3D, this idea of immersive environments are really starting to kick in. Anaglyphic at first, but it then quickly moves to 3D with polarized glasses. The science fiction imagery is starting to catch up. We now have computers for the first time. We're beginning with the idea of projecting images in the air, what we now call holograms, but they're not holograms, they're image projections. This is starting to appear in the 1950s. So this is beginning to tell us, oh, school over here, kids sitting in front of computers all day in class. That's not going to happen, right? 50, 60 years before there was ever a classroom with computers in it. Another untold sort of hero of the story you need to know, Eugene Fodor, created the Viewmaster in 1939. Every kid of a certain age had one of these. You got three views for $1. They could take you anywhere in the world and show you anything in 3D in color. And it fit in your backpack or your pocket. Another hero that's very important at this stage is Morton Hellig. Morton was a photographer in the Second World War in the Navy. He learned about 3D photography after the war. He thought, you know, I think I can create a device that would immerse people in 3D and really make it seem real. So he created the thing on the right, 3D, wide vision, motion, color, stereo sound, aromas, wind, and vibrations. He had all the D's covered, right? Everything we want to do. Ever heard of him? No. The reason is inventions are about timing. He was too early, right?